Okay, everybody, welcome to our CG over live action project that we're going to be working on. And actually, this is what we are going to be doing. So this particular project, we are going to be incorporating renders that we have done out of Maya into a live action plate. And when this live action plate, this should look familiar to you guys. This is just on our back lot at the gas station. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now the first thing that you guys are going to want to do is make sure that you set your project up correctly. So let's go ahead and look at our project settings. All right, now the frame range on all these image sequences is 146 to 175. So make sure that your frame range is 146 to 175. All right, and we also need to make sure that our full size format is set to HD 720p. So 720 resolution or 720p. All right, once you got that, you should be good to go. Then we can start importing all of our assets. So let's just go ahead and do that here. So what I'm going to do, I think I have the assets open, I do. So here are all of our assets. I'm just going to shift select and grab all these, all the folders, and just drag them into our node graph just like that. All right, and you guys should be familiar with doing this. Just make sure that you are importing these image sequences correctly. All right, so if you grab the folder, it should grab the entire image sequence. And what I mean by image sequence is that if I look at this particular occlusion, hit 1 on the keyboard, all right, there is our occlusion image sequence. All right, you can see its frame range, 146 to 175. So that's how many frames are in this particular sequence. So it's imported correctly. If you ever see this say frame range 1 to 1 on this guy, or any one of these guys, that means that you didn't import it correctly. All right. Oh, and I'm getting a license error. Don't worry about that. It's just our server has issues sometimes with the license. Okay. So we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and, again, I'm going to drag select, so I marquee select all these read nodes and hit L to lay these out in a very specific order. All right, then let's just go ahead and start breaking this down and seeing what all these passes are. All right, well, you'll notice we have some kind of funky colored passes here. These are what we call identification mats or ID mats. All right, and we can use these color channels within these images as masks to color correct our truck, which we'll do here in a moment. So for the time being, I'm just going to grab these guys and just kind of move it out of the way. All right. Now let's see what else we got here. We have got, all right, so this is basically our truck. If I load this in the viewer. Now what we're looking at here is essentially the beauty pass, meaning that this is Maya's version of the composite. So it rendered all the lighting information, all the reflection, all the refraction, the specular highlight, everything is rendered and it's kind of given to us in this image, all right? And it is the first channel set of this EXR, right? We can also see that we have all the other render passes embedded into this EXR file. So we have our diffuse, which is just our color with some amount of shadowing, our reflection, refraction, a shadow raw pass, and finally a spec pass here, okay? So we can use these passes in interesting ways, extracting them, there's our alpha and whatnot, from this guy and then comp it together. It was similarly to what we did in our previous project where we were shuffling them all out. Okay, this specific pass here, this is called a Fresnel pass, all right, and this is used in conjunction with your reflections. And it's basically the principle is based off of the Fresnel effect, which you guys should have learned in shading and lighting. If you type in the Fresnel effect, basically what this means is that reflections appear to be more brighter, more prominent as they kind of curve away from you. All right, so if we're looking at this image, where it was blue, we wouldn't see nearly as much reflection as we would if it were red. So if you guys are curious about this, definitely look up the Fresnel effect and what this is and how it works, okay? We're going to use it, like I said, with our reflection pass, all right? But it's based off of this principle here with how we see reflections based off of our facing ratio toward them. All right, and we've got our background plate. So we'll put this over to the right. And then we've got this guy, which is completely black. All right, now what actually this pass is our shadow pass. If I hit A on the keyboard and look in the alpha channel of this guy, you'll see that is where our shadows are. Now it's just black and white information, so we can use this as a mask on a color correction node to create our shadows, which is what we're going to do here. So go ahead and do that. All right, so first, let's just go ahead and start setting up a slap comp. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to extract these guys, all these render passes. We're going to use a shuffle node. And again, I'm going to hold down Command, pull out a dot, and we're just going to pull out some nodes here. And Command C, Command V, just copy these shuffle nodes. Now, I probably should have done something before I copied them, but it's okay. We'll have to do some things. We'll have to repeat some things, but that's all right. When we're learning, repeating how to do things is a good thing, right? Because you kind of get in the habit of doing it. As long as you're repeating it the right way, all right? So you get into a good habit, not a bad habit. All right, so let's go ahead and start shuffling out our different passes here. Now, what I'm going to do first is in the Node tab, in the label, I'm going to type in open bracket value in. And this is just going to visually show me what channel set I'm going to shuffle into the shuffle node. So, for example, if I grab the diffuse, you can see now it's representing, showing me this is the diffuse pass from this camera out of Maya. Okay. Now let's look at our shuffle node and what it's doing. It's grabbing the red, green, and blue. All right, this is red, green, and blue. For the alpha though, since there is not an alpha channel in our diffuse, if I hit A on the keyboard, that's what the alpha looks like because it's using the blue channel as the alpha. So this is a junk or garbage alpha channel. This is not going to work for us. So instead, I'm going to grab the alpha channel from another pass. You'll notice we have this additional input on our shuffle node. So in this particular shuffle node, I'm going to say, well, let's go to our beauty, and I'm going to grab the alpha from the beauty. And you can see immediately what happens. So now what we have is we have the red, green, and blue channels from our diffuse, all right, and then we have the alpha channel from our beauty right there, okay? So it'll make everything, setting this up, work better, and we won't have to worry about embedding the alpha channel in later, all right? So let's just go ahead and move forward. We'll go ahead and grab, after this one, we will grab our reflection. We'll do refraction. I'll do shadow raw for this guy. This is just the raw shadow here that we can use. And then finally, I'll do this copy one more time. We'll grab our spec. Spec goes last. All right. Okay. So again, you see we didn't do the value in before I copied these. So each one of these, if you want, you can do this again, expression. Just again, get into the habit of doing this or having to repeat this unnecessarily when you're learning is actually a good thing because it helps you remember how to do it. Like I said earlier, just make sure you're always practicing the right way how to do it. And then we'll just open bracket, value in. There we go. Now we can also get little postage stamps if I want to see it like I'm seeing this up here. Just highlight these guys and hold down Option and hit P, and that creates a little postage stamp. So now I can see the names, even though they're getting kind of bunched up here. Maybe we should spread these out a little bit more. Remember, you have a lot of space in this node graph, so use it, all right? Keep your stuff kind of spaced out so you can see what you're doing. It's okay to do that. You don't have to bunch everything together. You can kind of space your stuff out. Give yourself enough real estate. I can even keep doing this. And yeah, there is some, it does take some time, and if you're kind of obsessive about it, you can spend all day just organizing your scripts, which I can get lost doing if I'm not careful. Okay. So that should be good. We should start being able to start our composite here. One of the other things I'm going to need to pay attention to before I do this is our alpha channel. We always want to make sure that we're getting the right alpha channel. So for example, if I look at the reflection shuffle node, you'll notice it's doing the same thing that it did with the diffuse, where it's giving us a stupid junk alpha. It's just throwing it in the blue channel. So let's go ahead and black out all these alpha channels. I do not want alpha channels for any of these passes because with the exception of, well, we don't really even need it for that. Because all these passes we're going to plus over anyway, which is going to ignore an alpha channel. So let's just leave it at black. Okay, so we've got our car. Let's go ahead and start doing our composite. What I'm going to do, create a merge, and before we merge, we need to look at our occlusion here. We're going to use this occlusion pass twice. All right, we're going to use it once on the car and then once on the background. All right, so to get the occlusion in our car, we are going to use this in conjunction with the diffuse. Now, this is typically not how you would use an occlusion pass. An occlusion pass usually works in conjunction with an indirect pass, which an indirect pass is basically just your indirect lighting in the scene, right? No direct lighting. We don't have an indirect pass for this particular shot, so we just have to use what we got. So in this case, we're just going to add the occlusion, which is your shadow information from your indirect pass. You can kind of think of it like that. And we're just going to add it in with the diffuse. Now, we're not actually going to add it. We're going to use this as a mask on this guy. So underneath your diffuse, hit G on the keyboard to create a grade node. And then in the grade node on the mask input, let's plug the mask input into our occlusion here. I'm just going to keep it over here to the right so everyone can kind of visually see what we're doing. Again, if you're bunching your stuff up, give yourself more room. You've got infinite, just about infinite amount of room. All this room to play with, okay? So, again, let's just kind of give us some room here. So let's set up this grade to work correctly here. All right, if I look at the nature of an occlusion, it's just a black and white image. All right, we're looking at our color, but it doesn't matter what channel I'm looking at. If I look at just the red, all right, just looking at the red, just the green, or just the blue, it's just a black and white image. So any one of these channels I can use. It doesn't matter. All right, so in the grades mask input, we're going to say, well, let's just use the red channel. Since it's the first channel, it'll be fine. All right, so I'm grabbing the red channel of this image, of this occlusion pass, and I'm using it as a mask on the grade for our diffuse, okay? So if I start to darken this, watch what happens. I'm just going to grab the gain and yank it down, right? So it worked, but it worked backwards from the way we want it to work, all right? And the reason why is just the nature of how a mask works. A mask works where you're going to see the white, and where the dark is essentially where it's not going to work, okay? So if we're using our occlusion as a mask input, what we need to do with the occlusion or the mask input is invert it. So we can invert the mask input right here on the grade node. So if I just click invert, all right, now we're seeing it correctly. So if I remove the occlusion and add the occlusion in, that's what we're getting. Now, I don't like all this occlusion like this. It starts to kind of look like smut, like this kind of soot, like smutty stuff, you know. I don't really like that look. But I'll drop it down to maybe around 0.3. And again, we can always come back and tweak this if we need to. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it like that. So from there, adding in these other passes is going to be plussing over, okay? Most of them. We'll use a color correction for, again, our shadows, but what we're going to do is take our reflections and merge it over what we've done here with the diffuse and the occlusion. And I'm going to set the operation or the blending mode to a plus on this merge, okay? So it just gets added in. Now we can always come back and adjust the mix of the merge to control the amount of reflection we're seeing on our truck. But I'm just going to leave it at 1 for now. Again, we're just setting this up. So then Command C, Command V. And then we'll take our refraction and put it over our reflection, which is over our diffuse. Okay, so now we have our refraction in there. We can start to see through the windshield. We can see our little Full Sail logo thing here. We can see our rear view. We've even got one of those little air freshener trees in there for you. All right, so now we can start adding in our self shadowing. All right, or yeah, the shadowing that's on the actual truck here. So we're going to use this again as a mask, just like we did on the occlusion. So from here, we're going to create a grade, And we're going to plug the mask input of the grade into this pass here, and just hold down Command. Let's just pull out our dots, keep everything kind of nice and squared. Again, this is a black and white image. Doesn't matter what channel I use for the mask. So I'm just going to select the red, and we're just going to bring this down. Right. You can see the self-shadowing that it's adding in. It's subtle. Right. You should see it at the top a little bit, maybe underneath these guys. You can see it kind of coming in. All right, so let's just drop the gain down to 0 there. So now we've got our shadowing on the car end. And finally, let's just plus our spec over. So once we get here, the spec gets plussed. Actually, this needs to be on A. Make sure that your inputs are set the right way. We'll do it like this, just again to kind of keep everything in this kind of flowing down motion. Load it in the viewer and plus it over. Again, that's way too much spec. If it is, we can always back off it. We're going to leave it kind of where it's at for now, and then again we'll tweak it later. All right, so here's where we're at so far. All right, we've got our car set up. So let's go ahead and work on our Fresnel and how that works. We're just going to come over here, move this way over. So like I said earlier, Fresnel is works with your reflections, and it's primarily how we perceive our reflections as we're looking at them, or as our facing ratio is toward them. So if we're thinking of masks, right, if we look at our Fresnel, we can think of this in two different areas. We can look at the blue channel and see that as a mask, or we can look at the red channel and see that as a mask, okay? So I'm going to actually use two grade nodes. So I'm just going to hit GG, right, and kind of put them right after our reflection. And then with the grades, I'm going to plug each mask input into the Fresnel here. And I'm sure you guys have already guessed it. One of these grade nodes, we're going to have the mask input be the red channel, and then the other grade node will have the mask input be the blue channel. Okay, so in the Fresnel, wherever you see blue, we should see less reflection. So if I go here, and this is the one that's the blue, I'm going to knock the gain down. We're going to do something like that, right? And then in the red, we're going to compensate. So in the red, we're going to push the reflections up. We'll go to maybe about 2, okay? So again, there's before the Fresnel effect, and there's after the Fresnel effect, right? Okay, so we've got our Fresnel in there, and again, we can come back and tweak these later. We're just getting everything set up. All right, so we're looking good here. This is our truck. Let's hit A on the keyboard. We still have a good alpha channel, so we're good to go. So let's go ahead and do our merge and see where we're at here. So I'm just going to merge over the background. At this point, merge A over B. Okay. So not looking too good yet. Again, we're missing the occlusion on the ground, and then we're missing our casting shadow. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get that taken care of. So the first thing I'm going to do is use our occlusion again. So we're going to bar this guy. So Alt or Option K to make a clone. And we're going to put him over here. And we're going to do this the same way. So we're going to hit G, create a grade underneath this guy, plug the mask input into your occlusion and set the mask to, we'll just do the red channel, and then make sure you invert that mask, and then let's start to drop down the gain. And as soon as I do this, you'll start to see the contact or the occlusion shadow come underneath the truck. There we go. We're just going to drop this down all the way to 0. So see, that's already looking much better. All right. Now we need to get our casting shadow. So our casting shadow is this one read node that looks completely black. Right? If I load this in the viewer, right, you can see, again, A on the keyboard, that is where our shadows are. Now you could use these shadows if you wanted to as your self-shadowing on the truck. All right, you would just use it in place of this one here. Although I like this one here. It's not nearly as extreme, and I don't think we need all this extra detail for the shadows. But again, if you want to, you can use this one. But primarily all we're going to use this pass for is this area right here, the casting shadow, okay? So we're just going to create a grade node underneath. Again, we're on the background plate. We're going to plug this in. And for this particular grade node, we need to select the alpha, which is what it defaults to, because that shadow is in the alpha channel, right? There's the alpha. Okay, so let's go back to RGB. Let's load this in the viewer, all right? And then let's start to drop the gain down on this grade node, and you'll see our casting shadow start to fall in. And there we go. So let's go to somewhere around 0.5. That's a good kind of starting off point. Okay, so we've got our shot pretty much set up. And we've got these passes we need to take a look at. All right. So this is where we start doing all the tweaking, right? And the integration into the live action plate and what all that entails, right? So I'm going to go ahead and stop this podcast. So in the next podcast, we'll start about talking about color correction, finishing up, finalizing, doing all your integration and getting it rendered out, okay? So I'll see you in the next podcast.